it's like a fast growing sport recently. And we kind of searched for a lot of other prior researches on speed climbing. But even after looking for a really long time, we couldn't find any. So we believe we're like the first like statistical analysis on speed climbing. Yeah. Okay, so starting with the outline of our presentation, first I'll be going over kind of what speed climbing is, because a lot of you might not exactly know since it's a very new sport. Then I'll go over how I collected my data, our methods, our results, and finally our discussion. Okay, so starting with the speed climbing wall, as you can see there are two identical routes, routes A and B, and this exact speed climbing wall has existed in its current form since 2007. So anywhere you go, if there's a speed climbing wall, it will be the exact same wall everywhere. It's completely standardized. It's 15 meters high with a 5-degree overhang, so climbers have to kind of use their arms almost more than their legs, although they're using all their limbs to like climb as fast as they can to the top of the wall and hit the buzzer and and the faster time would be the goal. As you can see, there are 20 kind of big holds, usually uses hand holds, numbered. And then there's 11 foot chips, also numbered. And yeah, the angles and everything stays the exact same for every World Cup competition. And our data was on World Cup qualifiers. And the reason we decided to take our data from qualifiers rather than finals round is because we noticed that athletes usually have faster times in qualifiers because they're just trying to reach top 16. And after they have a first run on, say, Route A, if that kind of qualifies them already to the top 16, they'll like go extra fast and not be afraid to fall on the second run, since the fastest time between the two runs is counted for qualification. I guess you can see it.
You can see it?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is kind of how speed climbing looks. This is the most recent world record, broken by athlete Sam Watson from America. And as you can see, maybe we can play it again.
It's too fast.
Yeah, if you notice, he doesn't actually decide to use every single hold. So he omits a few. So you're not required to use every single hold. You have to kind of come up with your own path to reach the top. And the rope isn't like pulling him up or anything. That's just, he's going fast completely on his own. That's just to save him once he falls at the top. Okay, so here are the main techniques and performance driver a speed climber will attempt to use. So first are the skips. So the typical skips are omitting hold 4 and hold 9. And if we go here, as you can see, hold 4 is kind of out of the way. And a speed climber will try to have the most vertical and direct path to have the shortest time as possible. So omitting hold 4 is very common for most speed athletes, and of course also omitting hold 9. But what was more interesting that we found is that for holds 12 and 14, it actually varied a lot between athletes. So Sam Watson, who we just saw in the video, actually skips both hold 12 and 14, but most athletes will either skip hold 12 or 14, so he's one of the few to skip both of them. And another thing climbers have to take into account, besides just climbing up the wall fast, is the reaction time. So just like the 100-meter dash, they have to react to a buzzer, and if they react under 0.1 seconds after the buzzer, it's considered a false start. So even if you react after the buzzer but not 0.1 seconds after, it would still be considered a false start and it would lead to a disqualification. And the difference between like a false start and a fall on a route, a false start means like instant disqualification, so you can't even have your second climb. And then a fall, you can still go on the other route and still kind of save yourself for a chance to qualify to the finals. Now for the data that we collected. So first, obviously we went on the IFSC results website for the 2 World Cups in Wujiang, China in 2024 and Salt Lake City 2024. And from there we saw more basic things like starting list, names, height, bib numbers, and of course their total times. But to find what we were most interested in, which was like skips and splits between holds, we had to go on YouTube videos and go in the YouTube editor for different qualifications runs, and we'd go frame by frame to kind of find exactly where when a climber would hit one hold and when a climber would hit another hold. For our numerical variables, we had obviously time and reaction time, and then here are the splits I was talking about, like time to hold 10, time to hold 16, time to hold 20, time without reaction time, hold 0 to 10, hold 10 to 20, hold 20 to top, and hold 10 to top. And the difference between time to hold 10 and hold 0 to 10 would just be like taking away reaction time. And then for our categorical variables, we had route A and B, so if you start on the left or on the right, and then whether you use hold 4, hold 12, or hold 14, which would be the skips. So yes, these are the variables we use in our models. And this next section was supposed to be Ben's part, but unfortunately he wasn't able to come to Luxembourg today. So I'll just quickly summarize it. The first pair plot kind of shows the relationship between split times on Route A, like different splits on Route A to overall time. And the second one would be on split relationships for Route B. And I mean, they're relatively similar, but there are actually some key differences that I'll go over in the discussion. And then the other pair plot shows register time versus reaction time, and kind of how the reaction time will affect overall time, and I'll also talk more about that in the discussion. For our methods, we did classic linear models, and I learned to use RStudio, and I was able to help Ben and Dr. Sylvan. And for the first model, we predicted current run time based on current run first half splits and hold strategy. And for the second model, we predicted the time based on previous run splits and hold strategy. So the first model is pretty much predicting the overall time after the first half, and the second model is predicting the overall time from the run prior to it. And for the results, we expected obviously the first model to have a much larger R squared, since we're pretty much just using the same run. Like the first half is gonna kind of leach into the overall time, obviously. But we were actually quite surprised that the second model worked quite well, which was just based on the splits of the previous run and the skip strategy. And it had an R squared of 0.5545. And then for our diagnostics, as you can tell, we do have an outlier over here, and that's just pretty much a certain speed climber who was able to do the first half of the route very quickly and very well both times, but when it came to finishing strong, he wasn't really able to. So he would fall right before the finish, and he wouldn't be able to qualify to the finals. And I actually did a test case with Sam Watson, who's my favorite climber, and I did it by hand, and I predicted a time using the second model. Yeah, this on the second model. I predicted a time of 4.68, and the actual time was 4.75 seconds, which I think is pretty solid, because 0.07 seconds, even though it's labeled like the fastest sport in the Olympics, it's still not too much of a difference to the actual time. And now for our final discussion and findings. The first thing we found, which was quite actually counterintuitive, was that reaction time in good runs, and we labeled good runs as runs under 6 seconds, which would place you top 30 at a World Cup. We found that having a slower average reaction time would actually mean having a faster overall time. And initially this is really confusing, because a faster reaction time, it's still counted in your overall time. So why would a slower one mean a faster overall time? But we figured out that kind of the mental burden of having a fast reaction might actually make you a little anxious at the start of the route, and you'll slow down and then end up actually losing more time than if you had just had a reaction time of somewhere from around like 0.15 to 0.2 seconds. So just being right at the 0.10 mark might not actually be as useful as you might think. The next finding we had was that the first half of the route actually has a significantly lower correlation to total time than the second half does. So although they measure the same distance, they're each about 7.5 meters of the full wall. Starting strong, although it's still obviously important, is not actually quite as important as finishing strong. So even if, let's say, you're a little behind who you're up against in the finals, at the start of the race, there's actually a very good chance for you to have a comeback and end up winning overall. And then finally, the last finding we had was that athletes who have a pretty solid first run time in qualifiers might actually try to change their strategy that they're used to for the second run. So as I was talking about, like the hole 12 and 14, maybe an athlete was used to skipping hole 12 but not 14. But if they had a solid run using that strategy as the first run, they thought they would be qualified for the finals, they might actually decide to try to maybe skip hole 12 and 14 as their second run to place themselves even better for the knockout bracket in the finals. And of course that would lead to faster times a lot of the time, but it could also lead to more falls. So it was risky and people usually did it on their second run. These are references and thank you.
Thank you very much, Luca. We have time for questions. I think we need the microphone.
Yeah, I'm wondering, does like height and arm span of the athletes affect which like steps they take and which routes they take?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So unfortunately, like on the IFSC website, because climbing is kind of a newer sport, we didn't have too many heights. But what we did notice is that, like in the case of Sam Watson, he's relatively tall. He's like 184 centimeters tall. And that might be actually one of the main reasons why he's able to actually skip both holds 12 and 14. But the average speed climber is usually actually on the shorter side. So, and they can be more explosive on the wall. But yeah, height makes a major impact. And usually the climbers who skip hole 12 and 14 are the taller climbers. And then the only climber who doesn't skip hold 4, which is the hold on the side, is also like a much taller climber. It just doesn't fit his box as well. And it means he would end up being slower.
I was just wondering, did you consider that the overall reaction speed that you were talking about being slower as actually an implication of survivorship bias in terms of the fact that those who've advanced to being faster climbers have actually taught themselves to react more slowly so as to be able to not get disqualified so often?
I think so, because like in youth events, which I also participate in, a lot of like the faster climbers, they false start a lot of the times. Like there was a case where this climber could have like won the youth national championships, but he false started right in his first round of competing. And even though he kept trying to compete for a fast time, he wouldn't qualify to the finals anyway, and he couldn't make it. But I think these like athletes overall like learn to keep themselves like safely above the limit. So like, yeah, like you were saying, like 0.15 seconds, maybe not just 0.10, because it's really hard to control just 0.01. And if you're 0.09, then you flew all the way to a World Cup for like nothing. So yeah.
So you said the first half is less important than the second half?
Yeah.
Basically. Did you look into the spread of the times for the first and second half? So my first guess would be that the first half is less important because it's better perfected by everyone.
Yeah, I think that's it, and also maybe some of the outliers. We weren't able to have like really that much data. So because some of the outliers, like I was mentioning, fell in the second half more, that would mean that like it would show that the second half is more of like an impact. And also, in a lot of countries, it's much harder for them to have a full 15-meter speed wall, which is quite tall. And a lot of countries might only have just the first 10 meters to practice on, and then like the first 5 meters to the side. So oftentimes, like the first 10 meters are practiced a lot more, like you said, and climbers are usually much more solid on them than on the second half, since to practice them, you might need to go all the way up there, but the first 10 meters you do like almost every time when you practice it.
Okay, let's thank Luca once again.